Peter Merrick, and I'm excited. We're going to be speaking with a really good friend of mine, one of my first friends moving to San Diego, Lee Sanudo. He was a professional golfer. He's a surfer. He studied to be a naturopath. He is in the financial service industry, and he's just a great guy. And I first met Lee because I was invited to an event where a bunch of financial professionals were getting together, and Lee was the most inviting person I met, and we become friends. And he has such an incredible story, because one of the things I want to touch upon is he's been exposed to so much, and so easily he could have got tied up into the world that he was exposed to, but he's kept down to earth. And we're going to be talking about mentorship. We're going to be talking about a whole variety of things, from parenthood to what's happening in California and how wonderful it is to live in Texas now, which I'm not living in Texas. I've already made my big move, and it was from Toronto, Canada to Commie, California, which I might as well just switch, I switched snow for sun, but we're talking the politics are just as wacko. Lee, it's so great to connect.
Great to see you, Pete. Thanks for having me.
Well, Lee, I always want to share respect for someone who comes from a family that has sort of royalty in it. And I have to share with why I have such respect. My aunt and uncle were friends with Howie Mandel's parents, and my cousin was getting married in the early 90s, and I had some cousins from New York show up, and my Aunt Joyce was a character. I miss her to this day. She's such a character. No filters, not in a bad way, but she just spoke. And she goes to my cousin Jessica, and she says, "Jessica, do you know Howie Mandel?" And she says, "Yes." And she says, "I want to introduce you to his younger brother." And it left such an impression on me, because I would never want to pigeonhole someone, because we are all on our own journey. That being said, Lee, your father was quite a celebrity in these parts, and you were exposed to a lot of people, and you got to experience San Diego like very few people have. Who is your father, Lee?
My dad's name was Caesar. He was a Mexican immigrant who moved to San Diego when he was 13 and wound up being the first Mexican-born golfer to win on the PGA Tour. So he played out there for a lot of years, and yeah, I got to grow up around some of the greats of the game, which was very cool. And yeah, I miss him every day, man.
Yeah, well, he taught you a lot of great lessons. And I remember you shared a story to me about how your father got his start, because everyone gets a start, and it really has, very few people really get to say thank you, especially multi-generational. And your father, how did he start playing golf? He was a young kid. He was an immigrant kid. How did he learn the game?
Yeah, he got a job picking up range balls. That was his very first job in the States. And I think the greenskeeper at the time took a liking to him and taught him how to swing a club. And it was funny, because he was left-handed, threw left-handed, wrote left-handed, everything, but there were no left-handed golf clubs back then. So he taught him how to swing right-handed, and he took to it, and yeah, the rest is history, man.
There's something you shared with me that I want to explore, because I think it is so powerful. So Lee is an incredible golfer. He was trained by the best and played with the best, but he's able to know someone. And how many holes? Can you read somebody?
9
how
holes.
many holes?
I mean,
you'll know everything about them.
And if you want to be their friend, I think,
Explain. Give me examples, no names, just give me examples of certain personalities that you were able to get. Because I didn't realize it at the time. I want to preface this. There's a gentleman I introduced you to. He's known here. And you're sharing, like, he just goes there on the court and he does this and that. I'm thinking, well, it's just golf. I don't really think about it. Yeah, because I didn't understand that this is how you're able to go and see a person by their mannerisms when it comes to golf. And
Oh,
I know this woman at a bank in Canada, she's one of the best golfers in Canada. She didn't play pro, but and so she loves taking people to golf. And she also never liked the fact that I didn't golf because I still had other things to do. Because she said I can immediately tell who this person is and what their weaknesses are.
yeah, it's really becomes evident because you learn how competitive a person is, right? If they're going to cheat, how they cheat, what their mindset's like, how they view themselves, how they view others, etiquette, right? There's so much to it. And you're going to spend 2 hours with that person if you play 9 holes. And have undivided, attention outside of the shot, which, if you're going to hit a shot, one shot takes roughly 30 seconds start to finish, right? So it's not a big chunk of time where you're actually playing versus chatting and well, watching someone try to even hit one shot, you can learn volumes. I mean, one that sticks in my head, this guy who was like, real charismatic, seemed like a great dude, got on the golf course, and this guy was captain of industry, okay? Got on the golf course, yelling, screaming, throwing clubs, being a jerk, and then blatantly cheated. We weren't even playing for money. We were just playing to play, right? And he cheated so bad, Pete, where I'm like, if he's cheating now, what is he going to cheat when it matters? When something's on the line, what's he going to do? So that was the last time I ever wanted to see the guy, and one of the last times I saw him, because you just know, you're like, okay. Versus the other way, when somebody's very gracious and is actually wants you to play well and doesn't really, maybe isn't that cutthroat with you versus him. Like, those are the people I enjoy being around, and just it's if I were to ever have to interview somebody, that's the way I would do it.
You would interview them through, like, saying, let's play golf.
Let's go play 9 holes, man. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you'll say that after me, you'll say, God, this guy is like developmentally challenged.
That's the interesting thing too, because if they're just starting, right, then it's more about like, okay, well, how well do they take criticism and instruction?
Yes.
So no matter what level the person is, you learn everything.
Well, that's awesome. So, Lee, what was it like growing up in San Diego? Because I'm a transplant. I look at my kids right now, and I'm saying, like, it's like the movies. Like, they leave their classes and they see the ocean, and it's like I'm going, well, in Canada, we didn't have beach parties. We went to someone's basement, and it's like no one here in California knows what a basement is.
There's no basements. Absolutely not. No, we yeah, man, it's like fantasy land. It was couldn't have been more privileged, I think. And I don't mean like necessarily financially, but just everything that we wanted was right there. And it's 365 days a year you're outside because it's so nice. It's never too cold, never too hot. Yeah, it was, we could either go to class or go surfing or play golf or go eat at a great restaurant, or, it was awesome, man. It was, and it saddened me when as I got older to see those things that I love so much become restricted for God knows what reason. It was wild.
Explain. What do you mean restricted?
So when they did the whole lockdown thing, they said you can't go surf, and I was like, okay. I was doing a lot of research at the time, and I couldn't wrap my mind around how am I going to get sick surfing? Considering
jellyfish. A jellyfish is going to sneeze on you.
Exactly. So like that one, but people accepted it. There was cops on the beaches, right? Like you couldn't go to the beach. And I'm like, this is insanity, right? And it was accepted, and that just kind of got me start looking at things and going, well, what's going on here, man? This does none of this makes sense. And you cut off those things that are so healthy. I think I mean, to me, going out and walking just 9 holes even is about as good of a thing as I could ever do, and much less jumping in the ocean. I mean, that's what's more invigorating than jumping in the ocean. right? And,
Well, it was so hot here. And the first time in 2 years, I actually was living in the ocean because it was, most people don't know that the Pacific is so much colder than the Atlantic.
oh yeah, yeah,
It's
by a lot.
so much colder. Like in the summer in Florida, it's like maybe someone went to the washroom in a bathing suit. That's what it
Yeah,
feels like. Here, it's like it's crisp and it's cool. And it was when the heat got really hot and humid here, which was 90. That was, that's not something that happens in San Diego. Oh, I wanted to be in that ocean.
yeah, it's heavenly
It was,
too.
it
But yeah,
was absolutely beautiful.
it's pretty. There's very few days that are 70 degrees or above in the Pacific. It's most of year round, especially in San Diego. It's between 55 and 69, 68.
Now, your father told you he traveled the world when he was playing for the PGA Tour, and he said, like, there's no better place.
Yeah, I know. I was always telling him, I'm like, hey, let's go here, go here. He goes, oh, I've been there. I just want to stay here. He goes, you're never going to beat San Diego, Lee. And I was like, okay. So I kind of accepted that. And I think from weather, I think he's right. I don't know. I mean, I've traveled a fair bit. And yeah, what's better? I mean, you're from Toronto. How many, what do you get, 4 months up there of great weather?
No, we probably get maybe about 3 or 4 San Diego days a year.
Okay.
I had a realization when I was my first year here, and I was traveling back every 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. And I realized something in downtown Toronto, it has the largest mall. What I mean by that is there's a rule that all the high rises and buildings downtown have to be connected to what they call the path. And there's like 22 miles of pathways.
Yeah, you
And
mentioned it's
it
all
dawned
underground, right?
all underground.
I remember you saying.
And the one thing I realized, I was in it during the winter because I wouldn't go outside. And in the summer, I would stay in it because it was too humid and too hot. So the Goldilocks, San Diego is Goldilocks. It's just the perfect weather, not humid and not too cool. You can walk outside. After the sun comes up, you can walk with flip flops for the whole year if you chose to.
It's true.
It's such a great experience. However, things have changed, and I've noticed it.
I think it's because, just the long, slow, not obviously California's always been a liberal place, right? Back in the 60s, you had, Berkeley being the hub of, call it the hippie movement, right? And
Yes,
over time, it has kind of bled throughout the state, I think. But I remember growing up, most people were pretty darn conservative, and especially in San Diego, Orange County area. Obviously, LA, I think, has always been that way. But yeah, it just seems that it's gotten more and more that way, especially now with the Bay Area coming south because home prices got so crazy there. So then they started buying up in Southern California, which I still think is happening, and it's like, it just becomes very hard to live there from a financial standpoint, if nothing else.
it is. Well, so you made a big choice in the last year and a half. So share with what like mentally, emotionally, what was happening, because you decided to leave a state that you lived in your entire life. You had such connections to it to leave.
Yeah, it really, like, you prefaced it before where I have in-laws here in Houston, so we've come many times and visited them. I've always liked it. I thought, oh, cool city, a lot to do, right? Big city. I mean, way bigger than San Diego. Um,
I don't
but
know if it's bigger, it's just denser.
no, by population, it's the fourth biggest city in the country.
Oh,
Yeah, it's massive, man. Like, it takes you 2 hours to drive from one side to the other. But that being said, uh, yeah, it really came down to when, my kids were kept out of school for basically a full year. They were in there for, I think, 2 weeks that one year. And we were talking to my in-laws here, and they never got, they were there the whole time. And obviously, I think education is very important, but more important is the socialization. And when I saw my kids go from, fun loving little dudes to all of a sudden they were scared of everything, I was like, this isn't cool, man. I don't want my kids to grow up this way, and I don't want it to happen again. And, I'm glad to see that they haven't locked back down or gone crazy again yet. But obviously now being here, and, we're pretty far west of Houston, but being here now for a good time, I'm confident that this would be one of the last places that ever does that. Because the people here, man, it's a different vibe, man. People are,
Explain.
yeah, I don't, it's hard to say, right? But like, it's just, people are very friendly here. They don't seem to as concerned about, I'll call it the minutia, right? They may be, I felt like over the years that Southern California especially became a lot more pretentious, like, very material driven, and where I don't feel that way here, and I don't know if that, it may be because of the much stronger presence of the church here than
Right.
in Southern California. I feel like that has a lot to do with it. So yeah, people are just, hey, let me help you out. What do you need? And let's just go have fun. That's what I'm all about too. So it's a good fit.
That's pretty incredible because I guess Houston, if you're saying it's the fourth largest metro,
Mhm.
I guess it's really the fifth largest metro because I came from the third largest metro,
Toronto.
which was
Yeah.
Toronto,
Sure.
and it was much colder. The people.
Oh, really? Yeah.
It really is because there's just been such a huge growth. So people just hold into their communities. And I think the UN for a number of years has said Toronto's the most diverse city in the world. And even though they call it multiculturalism, people live in their own areas. You can go into a place that you'll just hear Hindi, and then you go to a place and you just hear Italian, so, and it's just like that. So this for me is like no one's from here,
Right. Right.
so they're more open to inviting you in to their lives. It's very, like, you were probably one of the rare San Diegans.
Oh, and it's funny you say that too, because like I have tons of friends, and a lot do still live in San Diego. But yeah, when I would be out and about, and they're like, "Where are you from?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm from here." They're like, "What, really?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Like, you know, it is interesting because I do have a
Well,
lot of
can
friends.
I feel you, because when I would tell people that my grandparents were immigrants, but in Toronto, because the immigration is about 110,000 people, 120 a year come into the city.
Wow.
I would say my grandparents came in the 30s and go, "Oh, are you is that like the Mayflower? Like, like 1930?" It's like, because everyone like showed up, especially from, let's say, 1985 to now. That's when Canada really opened up its immigration. So I definitely relate to that. That the fact that you're like an oddball, like you were actually born in California now, but you're a surfer, so you told me a really crazy story that you went to a place that they have surfing, like you can find it. It might not be what you're used to, but it's something.
No, and the fascinating thing is, so there's a wave pool in Waco, which is about 2.5 hours north of me, and
Waco, I know Waco. It was
Texas.
pretty famous at one point.
David Koresh, right? That's what it's known.
Yes.
Yeah, forget the name of the cult, but they built
The
this place.
Davidians.
What was it? Branch Davidians, right?
Yes.
That's but yeah, they built this place. I went up there, checked it out, and Pete, I got to tell you, it's
How does it compare?
it's way better. I shouldn't say that. It's just different, right? It's more efficient. So, like, think of it this way: like, there, you're always guaranteed perfect waves, right? Where it takes you have to get very lucky. Like, everything has to just line up perfectly for the ocean to be that good. So it's, you're paying for it, but it's like, it takes a lot of the variables out. Like, I'm not going to get eaten by a shark. I'm not going to get stung by a stingray. The water's warm. I know that no matter what the weather conditions are, the waves are going to be pretty darn good. Where in San Diego, if the wind's blowing onshore at 5 miles an hour, you're done. The waves are going to be terrible.
Yes.
So it's, but again, there's something very special and something I cherish. Timing it and going out of your way and getting up at 5 a.m, to go jump in some freezing cold water and get one or two epic waves. It's different, but they're both very special. But the good news is they're building like 3 or 4 more of those things here within like an hour.
Wow.
So I think surfing will be, I'll get my fill.
It's because of all you Californians who've taken off
Well, that's the funniest part.
Texas.
That's the funniest part. When I was there, I only met one person who was surfing that was from Texas. Everybody else was from Hawaii or California or South America. They all had come to surf this place.
Wow.
And the best part about it is I've always thought, like, you know, when you're surfing, it's very competitive, right? You're fighting for these waves. So everybody's kind of a jerk in the water. That was eliminated here because you have your certain assigned waves. So everybody's happy and nice to each other. I'm like, wow, surfers aren't a-holes, right? They're actually nice people. It gave me a little bit of more, you know, faith in humanity at that point.
So what words have you learned that you didn't know or were not accustomed to since you've been out of California and you're in Texas?
New words, man.
Yes.
I'll say y'all all the time now, which is, you know, I didn't know if I would, right? But it's like, it just works. It's actually
Say that again.
y'all.
So
What y'all doing?
give me a context. Give me context to that.
In San Diego, you would say, what are you guys doing? Right? Here it's, what are y'all doing? Where y'all going? Y'all gonna be there tonight? Y'all gonna do this? Y'all gonna do that? It's just faster, right? And it's a nice, that was probably the most prevalent one. And then fixing's the other one that cracks me up. You know, I'm fixing to go over here, fixing to do this, fixing to do that. And it's, you know, it's
How would you say it in the old world?
I'm getting ready to go do something. Here, I'm fixing to go play 9 holes. You want to go? Fixing to go fishing. Y'all want to come? You know?
Any other words?
No, those are probably the two big ones. But like, y'all is the same as, like, it can be used singularly or for multiple people. It's fascinating, man. I love it.
So they know that you're like a transplant by speaking.
Yeah, probably, because I don't have this other. Well, I mean, a lot of people here are from all over the place. There's not. Well, I shouldn't say that, but like, there's a lot of people from Houston here, but there's also, like you said, it's incredibly diverse. Especially, you know, as the closer you get towards downtown, it becomes more and more and more diverse. I mean, it's like the cancer treatment center of the world, as well as obviously, like, anybody I talk to here, when I ask them, oh, what do you do? 9 out of 10 people, oil and gas, oil and gas, oil and gas, right? So they're not big fans.
Good pay.
Oh yeah,
good pay.
It is, man. Yeah, and I've learned a lot about that industry since I've been here from these people. So
yeah, I'm from Toronto, so the TSX is the oil and gas exchange of the world. So I don't know much about oil and gas, but I know that it pays really well, especially if they're on a rig.
Oh yeah.
And if they get hazard pay for being an underwater welder, whoa, they're making like $1 million a year.
Yeah, how dangerous is that, underwater welding?
Oh, it's like the most dangerous profession out there, right? I think the hazard pay is just crazy.
No, there was a friend of mine insures this guy. He hangs power lines, right? So in California, all the power lines are big up on the poles, right?
Yeah.
So they're massive ones that go across the deserts and stuff. So the way that they hang those is they do it by helicopter. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. And so he's the dude hanging out of the helicopter, running the cable lines and securing them.
Was he able to get life insurance?
Let's just put it this way: the actual liability insurance and it's just astronomically expensive, but it exists somehow.
Well, if you live in Florida, your casualty insurance is probably your property insurance is probably the same price.
It's crazy now, right? I feel bad for those people because they just can't get. I was trying to help a guy today, man. It's I think he's paying $16,000 for the year, and he's got 3,000 square foot house, nothing special.
And he's also paying what in tax, like property taxes?
I don't know. Property taxes here are big. They're expensive here. That's how they make.
What are they there?
It depends on exactly where you're at, but it's 3.5%.
So that's a big difference because in California it's only like 1.25, but property is expensive.
Yeah, and
food's expensive too.
I can't believe how expensive it was when I was there over the summer. it's, I mean, if you're not making at least 250, I don't know how you can live in San Diego.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't know how this city's going to survive. I have a friend who located down in Panama. I'm going down there soon, and he shows me like for $10 he gets like 200 oranges from the side of the road.
Right.
And I
Right.
always found it really strange that like fruits and vegetables are more expensive here than when I would go back to Toronto. I'm going like, how does that happen? Like this
Yeah.
is like how does that happen? Don't they grow it here? I remember, and I find different ways to try to justify, well, we take it from all over the world. They probably say that you have to have California only. So it's a racket.
Crazy, man. I pray
And when
for
you go for a steak, how cheap is it compared? You're paying a third less, half less?
it's not really, yeah, it's a little bit less if you go out to a restaurant for sure, but it's the quality that you get here, right? Like it's easy to find grass-fed, grass-finished beef at the grocery store and a multitude of it, right? At a very reasonable cost versus like good luck trying to get that in San Diego. I would go look for it and it's like, you know, for a pound of steak, you're paying $50 before you cook it.
Right.
You know,
And there?
yeah, maybe like 17, $18.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah, it is, man.
Yeah.
Eating
It
well.
is.
Yeah.
It's just it's not as good as when I went down to Argentina. It was just like you have a steak for like $4.
Yeah. That had to be a while ago,
It was. It was. It was when the world wasn't the way it is right now.
though. Totally.
That's it. Like I keep on. There's several things I say to myself, like the world has changed, and politics and all the things happening in the world. There are a lot of waking up. I think a lot of people have woken up. A lot of people are moving. A lot of people are evaluating their lives. A lot of families have had huge disagreements over what's happened during the lockdowns. So it's a different world. I have a good friend of mine. He's arrived back in Canada, and that was pretty restrictive. He was up there with Australia, and he says that vibrant energy of the big city it's not there anymore. And I think it's for so many people, when you came back to San Diego, it's not the vibe you remember.
No, I mean, obviously I was there before we came here, so it wasn't, I'd say terribly. If I would imagine though that like Toronto probably feels like a ghost town now.
A friend of mine, when I spoke with him, the tax lawyer, and he called it piss and shit. That's really what he said. He said you can go downtown. It's like the buildings are empty, the towers are empty because everyone's been doing
Remote.
telecommuting,
Yeah.
and in front of like the largest buildings, like 80-story towers, you've just got like 10 cities showing up, and this is like LA. Like this is not Toronto.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he says it smells like pot, it smells like piss on a hot summer day. He says you won't recognize it. One of the experiences I had is I did a little video and I asked, should I go back because it removed the restrictions? What came out of it, and for my friends who are listening to this from Canada, no one wanted to put something on my LinkedIn and actually say it, but I ended up getting over 60 private emails saying, don't come back.
Really? Yeah.
It was shocking to me. And before this happened, when you met me, I was a proud Canadian.
Sure.
Now I don't know if I'll ever go back and step on Canadian soil. And that's the one thing that Texas gives you freedom, right? Like you feel more secure that they're not going to be passing things through the school boards where parents are not like paying attention to.
No, and that's the thing. It seems that, I mean, I went and voted today, right? For our local election, governor and all the judges and what have you. And when you drive around the neighborhoods here, the signage that you see, it's flipped on its head, right? Where it's like, you'd be, if you say you're a Republican in Southern California, you know, you'd probably get berated. And here it's the opposite, right? Walk into a, like, I got my in-laws are coming into town. They're from the Northeast. They're pretty liberal. And, you know, my brother-in-law's like, hey, let's go drinking one night. I said, sure. But when we go out, just don't tell anybody you're a Democrat. You know what I mean? Because it's like,
See, I have the best. I'm just a green card holder. So when people ask me what I am, I say, well, I'm Canadian. I really don't have an opinion.
yeah,
And you know what I find really strange? I don't identify left and right. I identify it as being an individualist, a sovereign, to being a collectivist. And that's really how I break it down. I don't break it down. Like a neocon to me is just as bad because they want to go and start wars and, you know, make decisions for other people. I
sure.
really want to make decisions for myself. And we did a really cool interview yesterday with a guy, um, with an individual who's a historian, Matt Everett, and we were talking about Smedley Butler. And he wrote a book that every American should read. It was written in 1935, and it's called War's a Racket. And he made a really strong argument. He said we would have no wars if the people who were going to fight them got the vote, not the people who weren't going to fight voted, only the people who would actually give their lives up.
Right.
So we would only have righteous wars at that point.
Sure. That's a good point.
You know, and that's, you know, I just share that because Republican, Democrat, to me, they're all part of the dirty bird. And
Yeah.
I saw,
Left
well,
and
I'll
right.
tell you what, you know what I saw recently?
What's
In
that?
the 2004 election, you voted Democrat back then, didn't you? Come on.
No, I
Did
didn't
it?
vote. I didn't
Okay.
vote for the rest of my life. But go ahead.
Okay, I was just joking. I'm outing them. But I saw two interviews. I saw one with George Bush and with John Kerry. And John Kerry was a Democrat, and George Bush was president. He was a Republican.
Which Bush?
Both of them, Junior,
Okay.
the Texas one,
They're
the
both.
smart one. so, so both of them belong to Skull and Bones.
Mhm.
And they only allow in Princeton 15 people in Skull and Bones a year. And they make a pledge that they will do anything to help someone who joins that organization. And they were both asked about their connection to Skull and Bones. And both of them said they wouldn't talk about it.
Hmm.
So here are two people who are running for the highest office who belong to such a small club.
Yeah.
It's obvious that you and I are not part of it, but they're putting on a show for the rest of us.
You mentioned the left wing, right wing thing, right? And them being both part of the same bird. I think that's what you're trying to say, right?
Dirty bird.
Yeah, and it's like I don't identify either one either, but it's like when you look at what each party accomplishes when they're in office,
Yeah.
you know, it's which way do you want to go? So,
Well, tell me about wake up moments. I think that's cool.
I mean,
Everyone has a wake up moment.
yeah, you definitely assisted in you know, we've had an ongoing thread of
No, we can't talk about that on this, or we'll take it off YouTube.
But the wake up moment was when I met Peter at that Christmas party, and no.
Well, no, I was a materialist back then. Meaning, and what
Cool.
I mean by that is I was five sensical.
Yeah.
Like I looked at everything and the things I thought I wanted and the things that I thought were important. I realized that they weren't, and I realized that it didn't matter if someone was Hindu, Muslim, Jewish, black, white, Chinese. They weren't none of any of those things. They were all materialists, and a religion was materialism. And that I discovered is pretty dangerous because what it does is it locks you into a way of thinking. You ignore truths that are just so obvious when you just start asking the question and go off of a browser other than Google.
Yeah, exactly. And it's my favorite one, and I think you were the person who put this in, kind of drove this home with me, was how do you know? right? We've been told so many
Yeah.
things throughout our life that we never questioned, and it's like, well, how do I know that it's true? And how do I know that's not true? So I think that's something everybody should really ask
I
themselves.
wrote an article because I had to articulate that, and I came up with several reasons why I believed what I believed. Like, how do I know? Why do I believe?
Right.
One is the people who told me I was a little kid, why question it? And then I became busy and I wanted to get a career, or I was too lazy, or I was just too stupid to articulate the question. But more importantly, like everyone else, we are a social organism, and you're scared of being ostracized
Mhm.
for asking the question. And that keeps a lot of people locked into place. And most people, and I was guilty of it, if you don't ask, why do I believe what I believe? When someone asks you a question, you begin with a conclusion and you end with that conclusion and you haven't grown. And if someone says something that goes against that conclusion, it's like, oh, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it.
Sure. Yeah, and it's fascinating how passionately people will defend something that is pure regurgitation, right?
Yes.
And versus experiential things are all you really have, right? And it's that was one of the reasons why every time I went into another avenue outside golf's the only thing I ever really had any type of understanding of, right? Like I could teach somebody how to hit a ball over there, and I could do it myself most of the time, right? But there's no finite. This is the only way to do something. So when somebody
Right.
tells you that, like, how do you accept that? But most people just blindly say, "Oh yeah, sure, that's it," and don't think twice about it.
I just have to read one book. This guy, they say, is an expert. What
Right.
made him the expert? Like, I'm interviewing you. It's like, why am I talking to you? Because you're important to me. And if
Sure.
you're important to me, you should be important to other people. Like, who says this person's more important than the other person? Because if anyone reads Psalms 49, it says, like, we all perish, we all go back to the same place. And a wealthy person can't give a ransom for a life. Like, it doesn't
Mhm.
matter. You perish with the beast. And I just want to share something with you. This guy I really like. He's in Ottawa. He's a big broker and everything. And he's gone through the paradigm shift. So I
Mhm.
just threw out to him about like 6 months ago, flat Earth. But I didn't go any further with it. But someone else that he respected brought it up to him. He sent him that 5-hour video that cracked
Oh,
our
yeah.
minds. I remember going to Vegas being really like looking at everything with different eyes to realize how demonic it was. Like, I was noticing the towers, I was noticing the Luxor, like that is to Horus, like it's like almost like a death ritual going into it. I started seeing just how degenerative it was, and I spent so much time before I awoke and to ask deeper questions. I was very much into studying male initiation. And Vegas is what you would call a pseudo initiation, being that you go to a place that's designated and you go there with the intent for change. But what it lacks is an elder to guide you through who's done it. And a lot of the people who are involved in it's very nefarious.
Yeah.
It's really interestingly because he's going like, he's looking at the moon. He can't look at the moon anymore. He can't like I've gone through that, like that. I'm sure when you started watching that stuff, you were like walking around going like, where am I? It's like being on a boat that's going up and down. Like I like, and being in Vegas was not helpful.
Well,
But
it's
actually to see this, I just want to finish to see this guy like and he has no one like to talk to. But he said, but you said like you're flat Earth, and I just said, okay, maybe he's a little off or whatever. But now he's like going like, hey, I said,
oh,
yeah, but
really?
you gotta be careful. Yeah, you gotta like not tell anyone. You have to only tell people a little bit, and and see if they're open to it.
Sure. Was it you? I believe, I don't know if you sent me this or I just stumbled upon it. It was all in Spanish with the scientists and all the experiments they did.
Oh yeah, I did. I sent it to you. That was
That
pretty strong.
because it wasn't like, oh, look, we did this one thing. It was like we did 15 different things. They all came out this way.
Yeah, they also noticed it must be another continent too.
Which that trip, that's where it's like, okay, I mean, it becomes hard to believe, right? Like, because we're so embedded the other way, right? You spent how many years of your life never questioning the fact that where you are is what they told you it is. And now you're like, what if it isn't?
Well, then it changes everything, doesn't it? Because then you start looking at, well, this guy's in a white coat. Oh, he's a doctor. Well, he's a human being. He could be a psychopath. Like, it's like this person says they're this, who says they're this. Like, you become to the point where you start looking at things. However, I just did an interview with Sean Stone, and he was very interested in what I learned by speaking to Patrick Moore. So Sean Stone is, for those who don't know who he is, he's a filmmaker, a documentarian, and he's very fortunate. Likely, he had a father who reached some fame, Oliver Stone,
Yeah.
the director, writer, whatever. So he was so interested in the conversation I had with Patrick Moore. Patrick Moore, for those who don't, I'm now name dropping, right? He's Canadian. He's a co-founder of Greenpeace. In 1985, he realized that it was an organization that was turning from stewardship to looking at humans as being a virus that should be stamped out and being taken over by the World Economic Forum and the Club of Rome, and it was just anti-human. So he was the only person in Greenpeace, as the founders of it, who had a PhD in environmental studies and science. None of them had that. They were just activists. Number two, he's the only one who actually grew up in nature because his family was in the logging business for 100 years. And for the first 8 years of his life, he lived on cabins that were just on big logs because there was no shoreline where they were cutting. So he was the only person who'd actually touched nature and actually knew about science and nature. And when he spoke his heresy saying, hey, carbon is the gas of life. It's a good thing that we're having more carbon because trees use less water, deserts turn into forests and jungles, and they use less water, and there's food, and no one talks about this. But since we've started increasing our carbon, the world's got greener. Well, that's good. It's good. And the ice isn't shrinking. Al Gore was wrong. We were supposed to be underwater. Well, if Obama buys a $30 million place on Martha's Vineyard that is only 1 foot above sea level, like, I think they might know something, but they're fooling the rest of us. That's where the questions come in. So his question to me, because we had someone else jump on the call, so we continue the conversation, and he wanted to know what I learned from Patrick from the question I asked him. And I said, the question I asked him is, how did you survive?
Yeah.
All these people are in your lives. These people, they turned on you. And he said, I was very fortunate because the people who really knew me knew me.
Mm-hmm.
The people who were meant to be with me were with me. He says, well, we're talking, Patrick. Why would you talk to me? Yeah, I knew someone you knew who was your best friend who turned on you. He was one of those guys who turned on you until the end of his life, which I was a beneficiary of because he became more open. I thought his name was Bob Hunter. And I said, how do you know? I just because you and I have gone through, trauma. We see things that people are ignoring. This collective dissidence is just unbelievable. And he says, I just know. So that's all I can do is I just know. I can, and it was really interesting. That's really how I'm surviving. You just know.
Mm-hmm.
You talk to someone, you just follow that. Because how often did we hang out with people or go places like before this world went crazy? We just ignore that feeling. But we knew.
Sure.
Yeah, we knew.
And that's a very interesting point. Is everybody else ignoring that feeling too? I think about that because you have this dogma of propaganda that is everywhere, right? And is that something where, okay, like you and I live that way for years, not questioning, or maybe questioning a little, but just shelving it, right? We're like, it doesn't feel right, but I'm not really going to dive into that right now because I'm so busy.
I would actually point out something universal thing that I've actually discovered. Like you and I are not beta males and we're not alpha males, we're observer males. We were always observing. And if someone gets stuck into something, they're less, if they're invested in a group or people or part of a posse or something like that, it's harder for them to break because it's the community they're breaking from.
Sure.
I would actually think of when we were talking about this, I think of Mark Twain when he says it's easier to continue to lie to someone than to convince them they've been lied to. And the cult is strong. It's strong. I told you that story about my own family. Like that someone they knew was a doctor who participated 4 times and died in a triathlon. And I made a comment regarding that, and their fiance freaked out. They knew this girl, this doctor who died, and he was saying I was using a tragedy to push a sick narrative, but that's not the end of the story. The end of the story is his fiance, who's related to me, who like close to me. I was just invited to an engagement party, and I find out that they had heart issues, like their chest was pounding. They had period issues where they were consistently bleeding, and they were being tested for lupus. And I'm going, oh my God, this like cognitive dissonance of ignoring facts is so strong.
So deep seated, and it's been going on for so long that now we have multi-generational acceptance of something that is, could be completely wrong, right? Like I think about the fact that the medical industry has how many products to suppress symptoms of illness, right?
Right.
You go to any, I mean, shelves and shelves of stop this, stop that, stop this, stop that, but that's your body expressing something that needs to happen naturally.
If you put freezing in my hand, I can put it on a burning stove. It's still not going to stop my hand from burning.
Right. Exactly. It's a great analogy, right? So it's like, I think it's unbelievable that everyone accepts these things without questioning, like, okay, why am I coughing? Maybe it's good for me to cough because I'm trying to excrete something from my body. But no,
Right.
let's go to the store and get you this cough syrup so you won't cough anymore. Well, then what happens?
You lose a few years off of your life.
Right, because you have all these toxins that are still in you. It's got to come out some other way, right? So it's just that in and of itself, right? Not getting into virology and all that other stuff. With things that we've learned in the last few years about virology is like you have A and B, right? One group believes this is the way, one other group believes this is the way, and it's all basically hearsay at this point.
If people spent a little time, like about 5 minutes to learn how they discover viruses, they might have a different perspective.
Sure. Right.
Completely. They'll go and say, oh, this is kooky science.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like you're having these people look at something and staring at it and say, I don't see it. And they put them in school long enough and say, oh yeah, I see it. It's like all in their head. I want to share with you just a thought that came to my mind about how what I've learned about why people accept certain narratives and they won't change it because they're so enmeshed in a community, because everybody in that community, that's what they talk about. And a really powerful example was a series I watched, a documentary series on baseball, saying it was an American pastime. But it didn't really become such an integral part of American culture until the Second World War.
Mhm.
And the reason it was is because there were Germans who were pretending to be Americans. So one of the ways that they would test out whether you were a real American or not,
Baseball
they
card.
would like baseball moments. And it became like, okay, this is the language. So I realized what's happened in the last year or so. It's like it's become more like the language. So if you don't talk that way, like it's threatening to the group, and it's also it will take away your admittance to the
Mhm.
group. And I know the example of baseball and Nazi Germany and like infiltration. This really becomes it. Like people, this is what they talked about it. They didn't know anything about it, but they just talked about it, and they would defer. Getting back to Patrick Moore, what he also shared with me, he said, other than the screen, your screen, yeah, how do you know? They tell you it's on the screen. They square it in a box. And it's like I'll give a perfect example: polar bears. They show polar bears like old ones dying and starving. So they
Mhm.
used to hunt them. They used to have like guys like Prince Charles would go trophy hunting.
Sure.
And it's like and the population. They're black bears, but they've got a mutation in them. The population has gone up like 5 times since they signed a treaty. But they take pictures of these bears that are starving to death. And Patrick Moore says, well, no one's up there
Right.
and seeing what's happening. He also pointed out something else. He said they got no natural predators.
Right.
So if you're an old bear and you can't fish anymore, of course you're going to starve to death
Right.
and
Because it's so
die.
much more competition. Right.
Right. So you're going to live to an age where you just die.
Hmm.
And he said, but they don't tell you that. They tell you about how like all these coral reefs are dying. Well, they were dying, but now they're like healthier than ever.
Right.
They tell you how bad plastic is, that it takes 2,000 years. He said, well, that's never been proven. And they'd say, well, birds end up like swallowing this stuff. He said, well, they got to gull it. And he said, this is actually really good for them because this is how they grind up food. If it's not that, they're going to be eating rocks. And they
Right.
find that when they don't eat it, they expel it. So we're told half truths that sound really powerful. And the other thing is, you're like you're the worst carbon producer, and so are your kids because every breath
Yeah.
you take, you're producing 40,000 parts per million. Like when Bill Gates shows that calculation, he's talking about you and your kids, and me and my kids, and everybody I know. And who would want to go and take anything from someone who's a eugenicist? That when he started his foundation, he said, I'm going to take up the family project, which was getting rid of humanity. Because his father was a top eugenicist who took over for Margaret Sanger. Nobody knows who Margaret Sanger is, right? She was a spokesperson for the KKK. She was honored by Adolf Hitler, and she started an organization called the Negro Population Program. And it wasn't very popular after so many people were killed during World War II. So they renamed it. And Lee, what did they rename that organization?
Planned Parenthood.
Planned Parenthood.
Sounds
No,
good.
sounds great. It's like the Patriot Act, right?
Yeah.
They take all your rights away, but they call it the Patriot Act. The first time I realized that, I was teaching in Canada, and they had something called unemployment insurance.
Yeah.
Like they gave you unemployment insurance, but they renamed it and took away half the stuff they gave with unemployment insurance. But now they called it employment insurance. Sounded better, right?
Yeah.
They gave you less and they took more away, and it's like words matter.
They're everything.
They are
And it's,
vibrations. They can make someone feel good or feel bad.
but I think it all goes back to, there's so much being pushed on people that it keeps them afraid, right? And makes them feel limited and or dependent. I think that's the ultimate goal here, right? And when we realize, I think as a people, that if we just have a good mindset, that can overpower everything, right? You've said this many times. We've talked about this, the energy that is out there in the world. You can't destroy energy, right?
No.
As far as we know, we're told that. I've never proven that. I've never studied it. Can we actually destroy energy?
Well, I will say something. You don't live in this body. I perceive you as that body, but like
Sure.
it's impossible that everything you are is like your brain. Like anybody, just a simple thinking, they say, well, it has to be more than that. And if I now they've got special tools and I can see auras and I can see, that, and they talk about the universal consciousness and things of that nature. Like you're much more than what you are.
Yeah.
From what I interpret of who you are
I
or
think
what you are.
I think I want to say it's like the book of James where he talks about your body is like clothing, right? Like, ultimately your soul goes from place to place and this body is your clothing for this time, right? And I think
Yes.
an interesting analogy. But at the end of the day, it's just, I think if people can just, stay positive, enjoy their surroundings, stay in the moment and not be so preoccupied with what could happen here, what could happen here, this person's
Right.
bad, this person's going to do this, and it's like you don't know any of that realistically, right? So I think it's love the ones you're with and enjoy
Yes.
the
And think about like lifting your words. That's where words are powerful. I can uplift. Like I know, like I got out of, I'm really not selling what I used to sell because when I started digging, I said, I can't sell something that I don't feel good at because I sell intangibles, much of what I sell.
Sure.
So I need to go and know that I'm treading lightly on the earth, not through an environmental way. I'm talking in every way. I don't go out of my way to fight with someone at the grocery store.
Right.
At the same time, I will stand my ground.
Sure.
Just because the one thing I think one of my wake up moments is a friend of mine who's now living in Costa Rica. We were in Toronto, and he interviewed me, and I just I think subconsciously I was just it got ridiculous, because they kept on talking about opening the border, opening the border, opening the border, and then 5 months in, I said, I'm just gonna go. I'm just gonna go over the border. It's just, it's like it's not going to return to be normal. There's something up here, and what I said to him, and I believe it now. I said, you can think the world like the sky is green. You can think that. That's okay. As soon as you tell me that I have to say the sky is green, I got to act for your delusion, your craziness, not that you're crazy, that the sky is green. And you also need me to believe it,
Right.
then I have a problem. I
And
don't
that's what
care if you like whatever you want to do, but if you impose it on me and you impose it on other people, we talked about being an individualist or being a collectivist, being a sheep or being a shepherd. Better yet, being the wolf, where you just like a lone wolf.
yeah, I think like you just said a mouthful there with the imposition. Like that's where all of this animosity comes from. When you impose your will on somebody else with, hearsay at best, that's where it becomes a big problem.
Well, it's even worse because it's one thing if I was conscious that I was imposing my will on
Right.
you.
Yeah.
And another thing that it's like there's these evil people who are now getting the abused to start abusing other people to keep them in line. That is the part that's frustrated me.
Yeah, man. But I think, it seems that that's been going on for a very, very, very long time as well. So I don't
It
think
is.
this is anything terribly new. It's just, it's
It
really,
is and it is and it isn't. and I'll share with you. It's new because, Lee, you were born and you became conscious at some point, right?
Sure.
So basically, life is a series of consciousness. What sucks is by the time you and I get to a level of the most consciousness that we're going to have, it's over in this form. So in this form, that I
Right.
can say, in this form, it's over. Because I love the expression, I am a spiritual being having a human experience.
Mm-hmm.
And my whatever I am, I'm butting up against your consciousness.
Sure.
But no, you're right. You're fully right. Here's a question, Lee. Now that I warped your brain and anyone's listening, I could do it to you. I promise. I've got a whole collection of videos that completely destroyed everything I ever believed. And I got to share with you, you do come back together after a while, or maybe you don't, but you'll never see the world the same. You need to create community. Now that you've awoken
Mm-hmm.
to the world's not the way that you thought it was, and started questioning all these assumptions that you would never question before, would you ever go back? Would you ever be Cypher from Matrix? You know, the guy who says, I want to
Yeah,
become someone famous with money?
no, not a chance. Not a
Yeah,
chance.
me either.
Yeah, I enjoy everything so much more now than I did before. And I enjoyed
Well,
things, but now it's way better. Everything every day for me is literally just an incredible experience, and it's like incredibly blessed and grateful for that. Thank you. I got to thank you for that.
I'm present. I wasn't present. I'm just thinking, I met with you just before in January in a coffee bakery place over at UTC, and there's a picture of you and I, and you had just switched over to working with the new group you're with. And I'm just looking at myself there. I'm saying, I don't even recognize that guy. That guy was looking for business. He was doing this. He was doing that. He wasn't there. He's going flying on a plane to go back just to go and meet with people, to just go and be busy and try to get some zeros and ones in a bank account, which you need money to eat, or you need some type of currency. But it's that was my whole purpose.
Yeah.
My whole purpose was not that I was a bad person. I was just never stopping and being present to the people I was talking to, the people I was with. And now, those who have the ability to be present with me, I enjoy being present with them. And it's so much richer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that is that's what I've taken over the last 3 years. Yeah, I wouldn't want to go back. I wouldn't want to think the way I did. I shared with you. I realized I was always an individualist, but I was a materialist, and that meant there's a book that's called I and Thou by Martin Buber, where I is me and it would be how most people go through life, except for maybe a few people in their life, and they treat people as an it, as a commodity, something that can be pushed away, something that can be shunned, something that can be destroyed, something that can be manipulated. But Martin Buber said, approach everyone as a thou.
As a what?
A thou, as they're part of the infinite. They are a rain droplet representing God. And then at that point, there's such a richness, I'm open.
Right.
I'm open. And to find those people who are also open. And Margaret Mead said something which I think is beautiful. She said, a few people can change the world. That's the way it's always been.
Sure.
And it's the lunatics. But you're sort of lucky. You were California to be a little out there. People expect that of you. Me, they're like, especially if they say, oh, he's a surfer. Oh, okay, yeah. But me, I'm not wearing a suit, but it's for most of my adult life, people would ask me do you have normal clothes?
Right.
Because I would always wear a suit and a tie because that is what was expected in the role I played.
I will say this, dude, since you're there and you live really close to a lot of good waves, I would really encourage you to just try surfing because there's no experience like that in the world. Like you want to talk about, I mean, experiencing nature in a different way. It's incredible, you know?
Are you homesick? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
No. Like, but I'm just thinking through what you just mentioned about, treating thy neighbor as thyself, right? Basically, is what to paraphrase,
Right.
right? And when you think about, you said that, oh, it's expected for Californians to be a little out there, right? And surfing has that, culture of like, yeah, all right, bro, let's go get some waves, and being that guy, right? But at the end of the day, it is one of the best things I think anyone could ever experience. It's so humbling and it's so fantastic in
Yes.
so many ways, man. And you're there, right? And you want to go challenge, like go do that, Pete. I think that would.
I'm gonna check it out. So I'll tell you what, and I've shared this with you. I would never hire anyone to do my editing, ever,
Hmm,
because I came to the conclusion I just like learning.
sure.
Like I just like it's for me. It's just for me. That's what it is. And maybe it's my attachment to learning as well. That's I'm frightened in one aspect. I know we all have our unique abilities, and the one that I just take for granted is I've got a really deep curiosity.
Hmm.
I'm just scared I might ask the wrong question and someone won't like it and I won't be here. Because I'm starting to ask some pretty interesting people that a lot of people would be frightened to ask questions of.
Sure.
And I
Well,
have to be aware of that as well.
that's incredibly exciting, though, to me.
I know it's sort of like, yeah, I don't know where this is going to go, but maybe I shouldn't be doing this because, like, maybe I ask a question. I don't know if one of the great movies, the Capra movies, because he was just such a, Frank Capra, he was one of the great directors. And most people don't know, well, the movies that I always watched of his were Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and It's a Wonderful Life. And Capra just, he was also in charge of the propaganda movement during the World War II. Like he was in charge of that, but he made such beautiful movies. And the story about Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, here's this guy who just wants to do good, who believes in the Constitution, believes in everything. And he goes and he does this little thing. He wants to create a boys' camp. And he wants to develop on a certain plot of land. And because he did that, and he falls because he did that, he stepped on some big toes. And now they want to destroy him because he asked a question that shouldn't have been asked. Well, I will say this, and I think you agree with me. I'm responsible for my children to be independent.
Mhm.
But my soul is more important than anything or what anyone thinks of me or whatever PR is put out of me.
Sure.
And I really don't care. And getting back to the Patrick Moore interview, he got to a point where the truth was more important than him being ostracized
Sure.
because his soul meant more than having people say how wonderful he is because he was saying the right things that the powers that be said you could talk about.
Yeah, I think it's throughout history, those that say things that are against the powers that be tend to get backlash, right? So,
Yeah, but those people actually, there was a Mexican, I'm trying to remember his name. He said, "I'd rather die standing than live on my knees." And there's no greater words than that. And Martin Luther King in his last speech. I'm just going to paraphrase it because I just think it was so beautiful. At 38 years old, 3 months before he was assassinated, he said, if you came up so important, morally important, and you died at 38 for standing up for what was right, or you didn't stand up and you lived to a 90, when you died at 90, your physical body would just be joining your soul and your spirit that had died at 38.
Yeah.
The big question I have is when I'm really faced with an issue, where it's a life death, will I stand up for what I know is right, or will I cower? You never know until the moment comes.
Yeah.
I truly believe that it comes through constantly introspection, and this is something, Lee, you're awesome at. You're awesome on spending a lot of time thinking, contemplating, asking, playing scenarios out. Maybe, that's the gift your father gave you by getting you the gift of like golf and figuring out,
Yeah. Could be. There's
it's
a
a
lot of
mental game more than anything.
Well, it's a lot of risk assessment too, right? Like, what shot do I want to hit? Is it worth trying to hit that shot? It's maybe that's why I'm in insurance. I don't know.
Your life. I joke too. I don't know about you, but when I walk in a room, the first thing I look for are the exits.
Really? How do I get
Yeah,
out?
I can't. Sometimes it doesn't work for romantic relationships too. How do I sneak out? When I say to you, when we first met before all this crap, and I went through this huge evaluation, I'm not that guy anymore. I don't even know who that guy was.
Me too, man. We were two different people at that point, no question.
I don't even know who I was. Like I don't dislike that guy. I just say that guy's clearly. It's like he was an NPC. Like
Not sure.
yeah,
Dude,
he wasn't even playing his own life.
But that was amazing though, because I was like, this guy's handing out books as his business card. This is amazing. And it was just like,
Yeah, but that was my problem. I was on the make. Like I couldn't, like, what would happen to me, Lee? If I went to a place and I didn't see I could do anything, I would sit in the corner and I wouldn't really evolve anything. Like I wouldn't even talk. And then I would it was a sickness. I was so good at actually pointing out, like finding the people who could actually help me get to where I needed to go. I was so good. It's like I was so good at that. But what I was missing is I was missing the moment. I was never in the moment. I was always looking at the next thing. And I would have my partner talk about the deal we were working on. I said, that's your job to do that. I have to go and find the next person. But that's how my brain was always like going, like where am I gonna go and like what am I gonna do?
That's incredibly stressful, man. That like you got used to that, right? Like people, I almost feel like there's a religion of busyness, right? Like
Yeah.
as long as you're busy, you're being a good little worker bee, and you're doing what you're supposed to do, right?
Well, not only that, one of the things, and it's interesting because I wrote that book and I didn't realize, and I just want because I had that book almost hit twice, but it did it for some reason. But it's interesting. The guy I thought was going to bring it to the world, the book was so effective he left his position, right? So it's like,
yeah, but you never know where that might lead. I mean, that's
you're right. You're right, and I become good friends with them, and we connected on a really human level. So I've had to have a lot of time to think about that book because I realized when I was reading that book, it was one of the few things in my life, maybe it was at that moment, it was the first time, I felt like something was pulling me out of my chest, like pulling me towards like a magnet pulling me. And I'm so obsessed with that editing. I was so obsessed. I'd never been so obsessed. So I have to finish this. It needs to be perfect. There can't be a spelling mistake. There can't be a grammar mistake. There can't be a factual mistake. There can't be an omission in the ending the story. Like it just like we're talking every sentence. I was just going over. And then I realized something. This me at a subconscious level clearing out for the next stage of my life. And I needed to like let that go. That being said, the word that I put in that I intellectually understood, but now I emotionally understand, is the word Maya. illusion, and everything's an illusion in life. But it also, the second meaning is measure. So as soon as I look at the outside world to go and get measurement of me, I am locking down the illusion. So for example, when you play golf, the only person you're really playing against is yourself. But as soon as you look at the other person, what they're doing, then you're locking down the illusion. I'll leave one last story because I completely forgot something. What started me on myself, like hypnosis and all that shit. I got into sales, and I was like saying, okay, here's this. I'll read this book. I'll be super good. I'll be the best salesman. You know what I'm talking about? Like, like someone tells you how to golf and that's going to be it. No, that's just that person's perspective, their viewpoint. So there was this like, write what you want. So write what you want. So I'm like 25 years old. I write down what I want. I stare at this piece of paper. I'm completely disgusted what came out of it. Everything I want is for other people to give me validation for me.
Wow.
And I looked at it, but I seriously looked at it. And I'm going like, that's your life? Like that's your life? Like you better spend some time figuring out why you need these other people who don't even think twice about you to like give you validation. They don't care about you. They don't care if you have a Rolls Royce. They don't care if you've got like a 20,000 square foot home. They don't care about that. Why do you care so much to get these people that you don't even care about to go and tell you how great you are? I'm going like, you better work on yourself if that's what you want. Like I didn't fully articulate, but I thought about that recently because too many people, and the reason I think about that now in relation to what you shared to me is that guy who was a big CEO. He cheated because he didn't want other people to see. He wanted to be the winner.
Right.
He cared too much.
Right.
He cared too much. I don't really care. I have a friend, and I did an interview you should watch it. It's with Greg Pesci. He said something. He's such a beautiful man. Such one of the most beautiful. I'm so lucky I discovered him when I was writing my book. This guy is so brilliant, but so humble. And he says he likes being the stupidest person in the room.
I like that.
I love that too, because that's how you learn.
Absolutely.
And you want to, I want you to underestimate me because like because if you overestimate me and you're a competitive person, you're gonna feel you have to put me down. Like you have to knock me down. No, think I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
Think I'm an idiot. It's like I'm a moron. This and that. That's okay. That's you live with yourself. Like I just hope that your neuroticism doesn't impact me. Lee, you've been awesome.
Dude, thank you.
Fantastic. And
good times, man.
I don't even think I have to. I don't even think I have to edit that much.
Well, that's a good thing. Enjoy your day.
Yeah. Well, what's going to be the coolest thing, and this is my last thing I'm going to say. I'm going to have fun watching it because it's one thing when you participate.
Right.
Another thing when you get to see the conversation. It's like conversations I didn't even think were so great.
Right.
I go, oh my God, they're real conversation. And that I thank you, Lee. You've been great on my journey because, man, when you go across the Rubicon, you have to honor those who are willing to cross with you.
Totally, man. Hey, a lot of good times ahead, brother. I appreciate it, man.
Yes, and hopefully you'll come and visit me in Panama.
You're 100%. I'm in. I can't wait to go.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
No, it was awesome. And it really kind of made me realize how grateful I am for you too.
I'll talk to you soon, buddy.
Okay, man.
Have an awesome day.
You too, buddy. Bye.
And the greatest healer for anybody later on in life is to mentor younger people. And I find this all the time. I sit down with business owners all the time, and they always give me unsolicited advice because they want to share their knowledge, and it's really important.
Here with me is Peter Merrick,
president of merrickwealth.com.
Peter is an income and capital enhancement consultant,
speaker, and author.
He is also a
recognized expert in the world of succession planning.
Over 800 published articles and 3 industry textbooks.
He's a Canadian who joins us today from San Diego, California. Thanks for joining us.
So, Peter Merrick, tell us about you.
Well, I've been in the financial service industry since the end of 1991. I graduated during the recession. The baby boomers were in their positions, so there was no jobs. So the two businesses that opened up were the technology field and the financial field. It was the Wild West in both of them. So I had this brilliant idea, and I had a friend of mine, and we started talking, and I said, hey, how difficult would it be for us to get a mutual fund dealer license? Not difficult enough. Thank God for those 10 years, the market just went up. I would sit down and I would take somebody's entire life savings that they spent 15, 20 years accumulating it, this young kid who knew nothing about nothing, and I would go and just invest it, and luckily it went up because the markets were crazy in the 90s. It was a boom time.
But in 2004, my life blew up.
I almost went bankrupt, but I was very fortunate because there were very few CFPs at the time, but every university in Canada wanted to offer the CFP program, so I got recruited as a prof. And it was great. I was reading all the textbooks. I would call all the big publishers. And what I came to the conclusion was the succession planning was missing. One of the issues was there was very little talking beyond the accumulation stage. Like, how do you have a healthy life after you've done that? I also looked at demographics. At the turn of the 20th century, the average life expectancy in the West and North America was 43 years old. And people are dying at 83. No one ever lived to 83.
Well, so I always say that there's two financial plans. There's the financial one that we work on, and there's what you're going to do with all your time and that energy once you're done. And with this thing that they've been racing towards, they've hit it. But if they haven't thought about what they're going to do after or how they're going to feel validation for their existence, they just never stop. They just keep going.
Well, it's not anybody's fault because when people are young, they focus too much on doing. And later on in life, they have to focus on being. So I wrote my own textbooks because I thought it was very important to talk about how do you transition from the first half of life, which Carl Jung called it the morning, where you're accumulating, whether it's your ego, designations, education, houses. The second half is deconstruction, giving wisdom away, giving away my money, giving away my time, leaving a legacy.
So talk to me about that stage. What's the purposeful way or kind of the best practices, ways, or considerations for people to take when transitioning into that stage of life?
Well, one, decide whether or not you want an exit. I find between the ages of 55 and 70, a lot of people feel that I'm just tired doing the same thing that I've always done, and I have the money now. So maybe I should get out when the going is good and pass on my business to someone who's got the energy to navigate it. Number two, who are you going to sell your business to? There's one issue about selling it to a family member or an employee. What happens after you sell it? Things don't go right. A lot of business owners want to sell their business because they just want to wash their hands. But by selling it to someone you know, you're not getting out of your business. The best is to sell to a third-party purchaser. The last one is after they make that transition from being a business owner, building a nest egg for themselves to have choice, they don't know what they're going to do. I've spoken to people who say, I'm going to take up golf. So my question is, do you golf now? I don't golf now. So what makes you think you're going to golf later? I just want to share with you guys a story.
There was a gentleman, his name was Bob Hunter. He was quite a celebrity. He started Greenpeace during the height of my blow up.
When I was going through business loss, he was bringing me on national television. And you know what he was doing? He was saying, so Peter, don't you do that?
And then he would give my phone number and he would give my web address. The reason why I went by merrickwealth.com, because it was almost like a phone number that would run across the television, and I could actually see myself making money off of it. And he was dying. He had prostate cancer. And he turned to me and said, Peter, one day you will be in a position that you'll help someone else. And let me share with you about the legacy. Bob's been dead for 16 years. And I'm sharing you the legacy of Bob Hunter because he made a difference for me. And if I make a difference in anyone else's life, I'm a product of those people who are willing to do things and they had no expectations. And a true mentor is someone who has no expectations that they're going to see the tree blossom.
The reason I wrote The King of Main Street is younger people don't know how to find the right mentors, and older people have this need to mentor. It's almost like a biological need because they can see beyond their physical existence. They know that the sun was here before them and it will be after them, and what's going to be left behind that they leave.
I would joke, I can't make you money, but I can definitely save you money. What I mean by that is I am a Sherpa. That's someone who would guide someone to help them come down. But I realize the most precious asset they have is not their money. It's their time.
What last piece of advice would you like to give our listeners?
If you have a business, the most important thing to ask yourself is, why did you get into the business? And it's usually not to create a legacy, it's to create the lifestyle that you want. And at that point, ask yourself, what do you want to do during your last days?
The last human freedom is to choose one's own beliefs, one's own way. Everything else you can have taken away from you. But what you believe and how you choose to act in the world, that is yours. And the greatest healer for anybody later on in life is to mentor younger people. And that is going to give you fulfillment emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. You guys have been wonderful, and I want to thank you, and I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you.